Hi again, and welcome back to the Programming and Coding Basics with VBA, Python, and Java with JavaScript, brought to you by QuadRoot R&D. If you haven't done so already, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell for updates on future videos for this introductory course, the intermediate topics in programming course, the data science courses in engineering, and more. In the last video, we went through a number of definitions and then discussed data types and declaration and initialization of variables. In this video, we will move on to the next thing a program needs to do after it knows what variables to expect. That is to interact with the outside world and get some inputs, do some processing operations, and then output those results. We will go through input-output or I/O statements with the Hello World program and processing operations, which include mathematical, assignment, and logical operators. You can write a complete program with just the information in this video, but it will be very straightforward mathematical program like a calculator or a unit converter, as we shall see in a temperature unit converter example, without any logical checks or intelligence. So let's get right to it. Now, in the first video of part 2, we discussed that inputs may be in the form of user input through a text field or an input box, or it could be imported from a file or read from a database. Inputs can also be in the form of events from a web page like a click or a scroll. Outputs include a print statement which displays on the screen, not to the printer, or could be in the form of an alert or a message box that popped up. Or you could output it to a file or into a database. Outputs can also be in the form of events. Now, these are a few input-output statements that will help you get started. You can always come back to this video, or you can download the cheat sheet which is linked in the description, which contains all the commands that we will be covering in this course in all 3 languages. Now we will be going through some basic input statements, a message box output alert, the concatenate operator, how to open a file for input, how to open a file for output, putting data into that file or printing on screen, closing the file, and the Hello World example. Now in VBA, there's something called as the input box, which basically pops up a dialog box where you can input your inputs, or you can interact with the Excel sheet that VBA is embedded in. So if you're using the input box, then you can store that input into a variable. Now here I've used X, please use something more useful. So the variable equals input box is a keyword. In parentheses, you put your prompt to the user, and it can be any string if you want. So age, name, whatever you want within quotes. And so that will prompt the user to enter the age or the name. Now you could get this data from an Excel sheet alternatively, and depending on the sheet name, which is usually sheet 1, 2, 3 if you don't rename it, X is equal to the sheet name in single quotes with exclamation mark, then the keyword cells, because a sheet is full of cells, and then you indicate which cell it is by specifying the row and the column numbers. So if it's A1, that's first row, first column, so cells 1, 1. If it's A2, that's second row, first column, so that's cells 2, 1. If it's B1, then that's row 1, column 2. So that's cells 1, 2. And if it's B2, that's second row, second column, so cells 2, 2. Now in Python, you can prompt the user using the input keyword and then your message within single quotes and parentheses. And if you're expecting a number, then you have to use eval. Now eval evaluates a string into a number or converts a string into a number if it's like a number. So you don't use eval for string inputs. In Java, it's a little more complicated. It's a two-step process. First, you have to print out the prompt or display the prompt, and then you accept the input into a variable. So by printing out the prompt, you use the system.out.println or println and whatever string you want in double quotes. And then the next one, it then tells the computer to wait in the console and wait for user inputs. Now in the previous two, in input box and in input, the computer waits for the user to enter. And once the user enters, then the data gets stored into a variable. So you can use x is equal to eval input age. So the same way here, after you've printed out, then you say variable name equals to system.console parentheses dot readline parentheses. And that will tell it to look for user inputs in the console. Now you can output data using a message box or an alert. This is not the standard way. Usually alerts are used for something more serious like an error or something like that, or if the program is done, but it's a useful command. So in VBA, you have message box and then in parentheses, any string that you want in double quotes. In Python, this is only available in the GUI module called tkinter, which is not covered in this course. And in Java, you can use the alert keyword and within parentheses, any string that you want to alert. And this is the same in JavaScript too. Now you can concatenate the result along with a string. Now instead of string here, you can output a variable. You could say message box in brackets and the variable name which has the result. Or you could have a combination of a string and the variable. For example, the answer is, and then a space, and then you can add the variable. But you combine that using a concatenate operator. So in VBA, it's the AND. So you would say the answer is space, close the quotes, and the variable name, which could be y. In Python, the concatenate operator is plus, and so in Java and JavaScript. Now for opening a file for input, you use the open keyword in VBA, and then the file location and name within double quotes, and the keywords for input as, and then instead of using a variable, we can give it a number like #1, or it could be 2. And then we can also open a file for output as and the same as before. So the functions are for input or for output, so that it knows whether to read or write. And then you can print whatever data into your file using the print command. So you can print into the location, which is this fed into this. So it'll print it into c:\file.txt, comma, and then your string concatenate with the result variable. And then you can close the file by referencing its number. In Python, we store the name of the file into a variable. So x is equal to open, then the file location and name, dot read. This is for inputs. For outputs, instead of read, you put w, which is write, in single quotes. And then you can, once you've opened it for writing, then you can print using the print command in parentheses, which is in Python 3.x. In Python 2.x, you don't need the parentheses. And then the message inside, the answer is comma y, or you can use plus y. Both will work. And then you can close the file using x.close. Now this dot is built-in method that attaches to whatever's fed into the variable, which is the file name. In Java, we can open a file using the file keyword. So file, variable name equals new file, and then the file name. For writing or opening for output, you use file writer, x is equal to new file writer, and then the file name. And then you can actually write the data using the x, which contains now the file name, dot write, so the dot write method, and whatever you want to output, which is a combination of string plus a variable. And then you can close the file in pretty much the same way, x.close parentheses, and close the statement. So these are just some basic input-output. The most famous is the print command, which over here is print, or print in Python, or system.out.println is a form of output in Java. Originally it was system.out.print, which you can still use. However, println just says that this should be fit on one line, and then whatever comes next goes on the next line. If you use just print, and if you use printed something else, that something else would appear on the same line as the previous one. So with that, we can actually write our first program, which is basically a very dumb program, which is called Hello World, and it's tradition for every programming course. And I call it dumb because it has no inputs, no processing statements, no variables. It just has one single output statement, which is hard-coded. So it's simply, you open the program with the sub in VBA, give it the name that's appropriate, and then comment it to explain what the program's about, and then your message box, hello world, in parentheses and double quotes. Now, this is hard-coded. Alternatively, you could output it in a cell, in cell A1. So it would be sheet 1 cells 1 equals to hello world. So it's the opposite of this. Here we are using the cell reference as an input, but we could also output by shifting this on the left hand side, and then on the right hand side saying what we want to output. So we can say sheet 1 cells 1 equal to hello world in double quotes, and then we end the program. But it's important to know this because it's important to know how to output. In Python, suppose we have a function called hello world, and note the convention I've used, which is lower underscore. Here I've used lower camel case, and then the colon, and then everything else is indented that belongs to this function. So there's a comment, and I'm saying this is a Python 3.x example because I have parentheses with the print statement. So the print statement, all important print statement with the parentheses, and then your message in single quotes. Now, no parenthesis is required in Python 2.x, just a space. So it's print space, and then your message. In Java, it's slightly more complicated. Now, previously we had looked at a JavaScript example of a function, but in Java we have classes and methods, and here we have a method within a class. Now the class is always outside a method. It's the main program, so to say. So we start with class, keyword class, and then the name of the program, or the name of the class rather, which is in upper camel case. So classes are always upper camel case and methods are lower camel case. So the name of the method within this class is the main method. The main method is always the first method. And so within hello world, curly brackets, we have the main method, and the method is called using this static public void keywords and the name of the method, and then string square brackets args. We'll look into what this all means a bit later on. For now, just take it as it is. Then I put a comment. This is a Java example, not JavaScript. And then we print out system.out.println and then the message. Now, this is not an exhaustive list of input-output statements. The complexity in programming arises from interactivity with people, events, databases, sensors, files. These will be covered in the intermediate level of programming course. Now, I've also not covered input-output statements for JavaScript. Note that Java and JavaScript are not by the same creators. JavaScript is a scripting language with the same syntax and standard libraries of functions as that of Java, but for the web. By scripting, I mean it's not a fully fledged programming language, but you can write functions for web pages. So when you learn Java, you get JavaScript for free. However, the inputs and outputs for JavaScript differ from Java, as it interacts with the web pages through events. So it's an event-driven language. That will be covered in the Web Applications Development course with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and PHP. So be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to get updates when those courses are up. Now let's move on to arithmetic and logical operations. Now, arithmetic operations use the PEMDAS or Bodmas rule depending on where you grew up. I grew up where it was called Bodmas, but they mean the same. It just means that first parentheses are taken into account for doing your calculations. After that, exponentiation or the order. After that, it's the multiplication and division from left to right. And last, the addition and subtraction from left to right. Now, assignment operations assign an expression to a variable. Now, variables on the left-hand side and the expressions on the right-hand side. Now, expressions may include a value. Now, logical operators are used to check if a condition is met, and they're used in conjunction with control flow statements like loops and branches. Now, these are the main operators for arithmetic, assignment, and logical. So for additions, subtraction, multiplication, and division, they're pretty standard across programming language and in these three languages. So it's plus, minus, star for multiplication, and / for division. For exponentiation, it's the hat symbol for VBA. It's double star for Python and Java and JavaScript. For the remainder, VBA does not have an operator, but it has a built-in function called mod. You use mod and then the number to be divided and the divisor y. Say 5 and 2, mod of 5 and 2 would be 1, which means the remainder of 5 divided by 2 would be 1. So in Python, you use the operator %, and the same for Java. So x % y, say 5% 2 would give you a remainder or modulus of 1. The assignment operator equal to sign is also another standard across languages and these three. Now it's not to be confused with the logical equal to sign, which I will discuss in a minute. But before that, let's talk about incrementation. So incrementation is when we need to increase the value of a variable by an amount, like 1. Now this is especially useful in loops, which we'll be discussing in the next video. And you can change the value of a variable by saying the variable name equals to the same variable name plus 1. So it will update the value that was in the variable by 1. Suppose x is equal to 2, then the new value for x should be equal to 2 plus 1, which is 3. And then the new value gets stored into the variable. Now you can increment it by 2 or whatever. In Python, it's pretty much the same. And in Java, you can do the same, or you can use x++. The same for JavaScript. So if you want to increment by 2, then you can say x++ 2. Now we'll get to the Boolean equal to. And now these are logical operations, like Boolean equal to, not equal to, less than, greater than, less than, equal to, greater than, equal to, or an AND. Now the full power of this will come when you combine it with control flow statements. They cannot be used just by themselves. So Boolean equal to is when you're doing a logical check. And if you're checking if the left-hand side is equal to the right-hand side. So is this equal to this? And it's different from assigning a value where this is equal to this. So you're forcing the expression to be stored inside the variable in assignment equal to. But in Boolean equal to, you're checking, is this equal to this? Now in VBA it's the single equal to, but in Python and Java we use double equal to, and sometimes even 3 equal to signs. For not equal to, in VBA it's the less than and greater than symbol. In Python it's the exclamation mark and equal to sign, so that's not equal to, and the same for Java and JavaScript. For the less than, greater than, less than equal to, and greater than equal to, it's pretty standard across languages. Less than, less than equal to, greater than equal to for all three. Then you can combine these logical checks using the OR and Boolean operations. So you can say x less than 5 or x greater than 10. And that would mean numbers below 5 or numbers greater than 10. In Python, it's the OR with lowercase. And in Java, the OR is represented by 2 vertical lines, which you can find above the enter button, which is the same key as the backslash. And you can use the AND logical operator, which can combine, say, x greater than 5 and x is less than 10, which means all the numbers between 5 and 10, which could be 6, 7, 8, and 9 if they are integers. So with these, you can then combine multiple checks. You can have 5 or 10 checks. You can say x is less than 5 or x is greater than 10 or y is equal to 50 and z is equal to 3 and a is equal to apple. So you could have a combination of OR and operators, and you can make a pretty solid check. Now in the beginning, I promised that you can write a whole program with what we've learned in today's video. So we'll use that in developing a VBA example for converting the degree Celsius to degree Fahrenheit. So we start off by starting the program with the sub keyword, and we named our program C2F, which is Celsius to Fahrenheit. And we end our program with the N sub keywords. And now we'll start writing in between. So as I've mentioned, we start writing our algorithm in comments. So let's write the first step, which would be to declare and initialize the variables. Then you would try and get inputs using from the user, say. Then we would perform the operations, which would calculate the degree Fahrenheit from degree C. And then we would output the degree Fahrenheit as a message box in this case. You could output it on screen or in an Excel file. So let's start with declaring the variables. So let's declare a variable called degree C as a single float, which is single precision float, or a decimal number between 0 decimals and 6 decimal places. And I've initialized it on the same line using the colon operator, and I've then initialized degree C equals to 0.0 because it's a float. And we also have to dimension the output variable, which is degree F in my case. So dimension degree F as single, and then I've initialized it with the 0 value to start off. If you don't initialize it, then it will have a null value and it might create some problems. So now let's get some inputs. And we say degree C equals to input box, which is the keyword for input box, and then it prompts the user temperature in degree C. And then it'll wait for the user to enter the value. And whatever the value the user enters, it'll be updated in degree C. Before degree C was 0, but now it'll have the new value. And then we can perform the operations where we say degree Fahrenheit is equal to 1.8 times the degree C plus 32, which is the formula to convert degree C to degree Fahrenheit. Now we're ready to output, and we use the message box keyword, and we put the message temperature in degree Fahrenheit is. we put a space so that it doesn't look clumsy, and then we use the concatenate operator, and then we use the variable where the output result is stored. And so if it's 32, then 32 will be output, and it will just look like temperature in degree F is 32. So with what we've covered so far, you can write mathematically intensive programs like a simple budget sheet or a mortgage calculator, for example. Now for that, the user inputs required would be the mortgage amount, the interest rate, and the time period in years. So with that, we will stop here to digest what we've learned so far. In the next video, we will discuss two different kinds of control flow statements, finally, loops and branches. Be sure to like this video and share it with a friend. If you have any questions, put them in the comments and I will try to answer them. See you in the next class.